The December morning arrived cold in San Antonio, Texas. The thermometer marked 42 degrees Fahrenheit, and a dense fog covered the streets of the South Side neighborhood where Daniel Crawford lived. He woke up at 5:30 in the morning, as he had done every day for the past 23 years, even on weekends. The alarm clock wasn't necessary anymore. His body had memorized the routine of someone who needed to open Crawford's auto repair at exactly 7 o'clock. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his calloused hands rubbing his tired face. The gray hairs at his temples had multiplied considerably in the last 2 years, and the wrinkles around his eyes seemed deeper each time he looked in the mirror. At 42, he felt much older than his age suggested. The house was silent. Too silent. That silence had become the soundtrack of his life since October 2023, when cancer had taken Rebecca, his wife of 18 years. Every corner of that 3-bedroom house on Pleasanton Road echoed with her absence. The kitchen where she used to make breakfast while humming George Strait songs. The living room where they danced on Saturday nights. The small backyard garden she had cultivated with so much care. Daniel walked down the hallway and stopped in front of Jessica's bedroom door. It was closed, as it had been every morning for months. His 16-year-old daughter had transformed from a vibrant, communicative girl into a virtual stranger who hid behind headphones and a permanent scowl. The country music that used to fill the house, Rebecca's and Jessica's shared passion, had been replaced by an almost unbearable silence. He knocked softly on the door. "Jess, honey, time to get up for school." No response. Daniel waited a few seconds before trying again, this time with a firmer tone. "Jessica, you need to wake up now." "I'm awake," came the muffled response from inside, devoid of any emotion. Daniel sighed and headed to the kitchen. The coffee maker, programmed the night before, had already finished its cycle. He poured himself a cup and sat at the small table where he and Rebecca used to plan their days, their dreams, their future. A future that had been brutally interrupted. The kitchen wall still displayed the family photos Rebecca had so carefully arranged. Daniel's gaze lingered on one in particular. The 3 of them at the San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo 4 years ago. Jessica wearing a cowboy hat too big for her head. Rebecca with her arm around their daughter's shoulders, both smiling widely. That had been one of the last truly happy days before the diagnosis. "I don't know what to do anymore, Becca," Daniel whispered to the photo, as he did almost every morning. "She's slipping away from me, and I don't know how to reach her." 20 minutes later, Jessica appeared in the kitchen. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore an oversized black hoodie that seemed to swallow her thin frame. The dark circles under her green eyes, Rebecca's eyes, revealed yet another night of insufficient sleep. "Good morning," Daniel tried, forcing a smile. "I made pancakes, your favorite." Jessica grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and her backpack from the chair. "Not hungry, Mrs. Patterson is picking me up in 5 minutes." "Jess, you need to eat something more substantial. You barely touched dinner last night." "I said I'm not hungry, Dad." Her tone was sharp, defensive. "Can we not do this today?" Daniel felt the familiar knot forming in his stomach. Every conversation with Jessica lately felt like navigating a minefield, where any wrong word could trigger an explosion or, worse, more distance between them. "Okay," he conceded, his voice softer. "But please, eat something at school. And don't forget, I'm picking you up at 3:30. We need to stop by the grocery store." Jessica nodded without looking at him, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. The sound of a car horn outside announced the arrival of her ride. She headed toward the door but stopped when Daniel called her name. "Jess!" She turned, her expression impatient. "What?" Daniel wanted to say so many things. That he loved her, that he missed her, that they needed to talk about what they were both feeling, that Rebecca wouldn't want them to drift apart like this. But the words stuck in his throat, blocked by the invisible wall that had grown between them. "Have a good day at school," was all he managed to say. Jessica nodded and left, the door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. Daniel remained standing in the kitchen, the untouched pancakes on the table, feeling the weight of his failure as a father crushing his chest. Crawford's Auto Repair was located on South Flores Street, a 20-minute drive from Daniel's house. The shop had belonged to his father, Gerald Crawford, who had taught him everything about engines, transmissions, and the value of honest work. When Gerald passed away 8 years ago, Daniel had inherited not just the business, but also a legacy of trust with the South Side community. The shop was modest: 2 hydraulic lifts, a small waiting area with worn chairs and outdated magazines, and an office that desperately needed organization. But what it lacked in modernity, it made up for in reputation. Daniel Crawford was known for being fair, competent, and, above all, honest, a rarity in the auto repair world. Robert Jensen, known to everyone as Bobby, was already there when Daniel arrived. At 38, Bobby had worked with Daniel for 12 years and had become more than an employee. He was Daniel's best friend and, lately, his main source of emotional support. "Morning, boss," Bobby greeted, emerging from under a Ford F-150 with oil-stained hands. "Started early on Mrs. Kowalski's truck. The transmission is worse than we thought." "How much worse?" Daniel asked, putting on his work coveralls. "Complete rebuild. Maybe 2,500, 3,000 with parts and labor." Daniel grimaced. Helen Kowalski was an 82-year-old widow who lived on a fixed income. That truck was her only means of transportation to medical appointments and the grocery store. "Let's see what we can do to bring that cost down," Daniel said. "Maybe we can find refurbished parts." "She doesn't need everything brand new." Bobby smiled. That was exactly the response he'd expected. "That's why people trust you, man. Not everyone would think about the customer's pocket before their own profit." The morning passed with the familiar rhythm of routine work: oil changes, brake inspections, a stubborn check engine light on a Honda Civic. Daniel immersed himself in the work, finding in the logic of engines and mechanical systems a refuge from the emotional complexity of his personal life. During lunch break, Bobby and Daniel sat in the small office, eating sandwiches from the deli across the street. Bobby noticed his friend's distant expression. "Rough morning with Jess?" he asked. Daniel nodded, chewing slowly before responding. "It's the same thing every day, Bobby. She barely talks to me. When she does, it's with this anger, this resentment. I don't know if it's directed at me, at the world, or at herself. She's hurting, man. You both are. Grief doesn't have a timeline." "I know that," Daniel said, his voice heavy with frustration. "But it's been 2 years. Rebecca would want us to move forward, to live, not to exist in this limbo." Bobby was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Listen, I've been thinking about something. Remember how Becca and Jess used to be obsessed with country music? Especially George Strait?" Daniel smiled sadly at the memory. "Rebecca said she fell in love with me during I Cross My Heart. That was our wedding song." "Well," Bobby continued, his tone becoming more animated, "my cousin works security at the AT&T Center. He told me yesterday that George Strait has a show coming up. Not just any show, it's supposed to be something special. And he might be able to get me a couple of VIP tickets. Good seats, maybe even backstage passes." Daniel looked up, surprised. "George Strait? Here in San Antonio?" "Yep, the king of country himself, right here at home." "I was thinking, maybe this could be your chance with Jess. something to connect over, something that would honor Becca's memory in a positive way. The idea resonated deeply with Daniel. Rebecca had been a massive George Strait fan. She had all his albums, knew every lyric, and had always dreamed of seeing him perform live, but had never had the chance. Taking Jessica to that show could be a way to honor Rebecca's memory, while creating a moment for him and his daughter to reconnect. "You really think you can get those tickets?" Daniel asked, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time in weeks. "Let me make some calls. My cousin owes me a favor. But Dan, I have to ask, do you think Jess will even want to go? She's avoided anything related to country music since Becca passed." "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but I have to try. I'm losing her, Bobby. I can feel her slipping further away every day. Maybe this could be the thing that brings her back." That evening, Daniel arrived home to find the house empty. A note on the kitchen counter informed him that Jessica was at her friend Natalie's house working on a school project and would be back by 8. He used the solitude to think about how to approach the subject of the George Strait concert. The doorbell rang at 6:30. Daniel opened it to find Linda Pearson, their next-door neighbor, holding a covered casserole dish. "Hi, Daniel," she greeted with a warm smile. "I made too much chicken pot pie and thought you and Jess might enjoy some." Linda was 40 years old, a high school English teacher who had moved to the neighborhood 3 years ago after her divorce. She had become close to Rebecca during her illness, often helping with meals and errands. After Rebecca's death, Linda had continued to check in on Daniel and Jessica, her kindness a constant source of support. "Linda, you didn't have to do that," Daniel said, though he accepted the dish gratefully. "But thank you. Cooking hasn't exactly been my strong suit lately." "I know," she said gently. "That's why I brought it. How are you doing? How's Jessica?" Daniel stepped aside, inviting her in. "We're managing, or trying to. Coffee? Sure." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Daniel had sat alone that morning. Linda had an easy presence, comfortable and undemanding. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her auburn hair falling loosely around her shoulders. "Jessica's still struggling," Daniel confessed after a few minutes of small talk. "We barely communicate. When we do, it's either arguments or awkward silence. I don't know how to reach her anymore." Linda listened attentively, her blue eyes filled with compassion. Teenagers are complicated even under normal circumstances. Add grief to that equation, and it becomes exponentially harder. "Have you considered family counseling?" "I've suggested it. She refuses, says she doesn't need to talk to a stranger about her feelings." Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. "My friend Bobby suggested something today, though. Taking her to a George Strait concert." Linda's eyebrows rose. "George Strait? That's the singer Rebecca loved, right?" "Exactly. It was their thing, Becca and Jess. They used to sing along to his songs, knew every word. I thought maybe it could be a way to connect, to remember Becca together in a positive way, instead of this painful silence we've been living in." "It's a beautiful idea," Linda said thoughtfully, "but you need to be prepared for the possibility that it might be too painful for Jessica. Those songs carry a lot of memories." "I know, but I have to try something, Linda. I can't just watch her drift away." Linda reached across the table and placed her hand over Daniel's. The gesture was brief but comforting. "You're a good father, Daniel. Don't doubt that. Jessica is lucky to have you, even if she can't see it right now." Daniel felt a warmth spread through his chest. Not romantic, but the simple comfort of human connection, of being seen and understood. "Thank you, Linda, for everything, for being there." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily between topics: school, work, memories of Rebecca, hopes for the future. When Linda finally left, Daniel realized it was the first time in months he'd felt something other than grief or frustration. It was a small light in a very dark tunnel. Jessica came home at 8:15, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression the usual mask of teenage indifference. "Hey, honey," Daniel greeted from the couch, where he'd been pretending to watch television while actually rehearsing what to say. "How was the project?" "Fine," Jessica replied, heading straight for the stairs. "Jess, wait, can we talk for a minute?" She stopped, her body language defensive. "About what?" "Come sit down, please." Jessica sighed dramatically but complied, dropping into the armchair across from the couch, her phone still in her hand. Daniel took a deep breath. "I know things have been hard between us. I know I'm not the best at talking about feelings or knowing what to say, but I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be the father you need." Jessica said nothing, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. "Your mom loved George Strait," Daniel continued, his voice softer. "I know you did too. You both knew every song, every lyric. It was your thing." At the mention of her mother, Jessica's jaw tightened. "Why are you bringing this up?" "Because George Strait is coming to San Antonio, to the AT&T Center, and Bobby thinks he can get us VIP tickets. I thought maybe we could go together. For your mom, to remember her." Jessica looked up then, her green eyes flashing with an emotion Daniel couldn't quite identify. Anger, pain, fear, all mixed together. "You want me to go to a country concert? To listen to the music Mom loved? I thought it might be nice. A way to honor her memory." "No," Jessica said sharply, standing up. "No way. I can't listen to that music, Dad. It hurts too much. Every song reminds me of her, of everything we lost. Jess, you don't get it." Her voice rose, cracking with emotion. "When I hear those songs, all I can think about is how she's gone, how she'll never sing them again, how we'll never go to concerts together like we always planned. It's too painful." Daniel stood too, reaching out to her, but Jessica stepped back. "Honey, I understand it's painful, but shutting out everything that reminds us of her isn't the answer. We need to find a way to remember her that doesn't only hurt." Tears streamed down Jessica's face now, the careful mask she'd worn for months finally cracking. "I can't, Dad. I just can't. Please don't make me." "I'm not trying to make you do anything," Daniel said gently. "I just thought—" "Well, you thought wrong," Jessica interrupted, her voice breaking completely. "I'm not going to that concert. I'm never listening to that music again. It's too hard." She turned and ran up the stairs, her bedroom door slamming moments later. Daniel stood in the living room, the echo of her pain reverberating through the house. He'd tried to build a bridge, and instead, he'd widened the chasm between them. He sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. The silence of the house pressed in on him, suffocating and heavy. Somewhere upstairs, he could hear Jessica crying, muffled sobs that tore at his heart. "I'm sorry, Becca," he whispered into the empty room. "I don't know how to do this without you." The December night grew colder outside, frost forming on the windows. Inside the Crawford house, a father and daughter grieved separately, each trapped in their own pain, unable to reach across the distance that loss had created between them. The week following Daniel's conversation with Jessica about the George Strait concert felt like the longest of his life. The atmosphere in the Crawford household had shifted from uncomfortable silence to something even worse. A palpable tension that hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Jessica barely spoke to him at all now, communicating only through one-word answers and avoiding eye contact whenever possible. Daniel threw himself into work at the shop, finding solace in the straightforward problems that cars presented. Unlike human relationships, engines operated on logic and predictable patterns. When something broke, you could diagnose it, fix it, and move on. It was Thursday afternoon, 5 days after the disastrous conversation, when Bobby approached Daniel with news. Daniel was underneath a Chevrolet Silverado, replacing a worn catalytic converter, when he heard Bobby's voice. "Dan, you got a minute?" Daniel slid out from under the vehicle, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's up?" Bobby's expression was excited but cautious. "I talked to my cousin. He came through. I've got 2 VIP tickets for the George Strait show, December 22nd, front section seats, and there's a meet and greet opportunity before the show." Daniel felt his heart skip. The George Strait concert was real, tangible. But the excitement was immediately tempered by the memory of Jessica's tearful rejection. "That's incredible, Bobby. Really. But I don't think Jess is going to change her mind. She was pretty clear about not wanting to go." Bobby leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. "Can I be honest with you, man? I think you're giving up too easy." "I'm not giving up." "You are," Bobby interrupted gently. "Look, I get it. You don't want to push her. You don't want to cause more pain. But sometimes, Dan, people need to be pushed out of their comfort zone, especially when that comfort zone is actually just a cage they've built around themselves." Daniel considered this, the weight of the wrench in his hand somehow feeling heavier. What if I push? And she pulls away even more? What if this destroys what little connection we have left? And what if you don't push, and she stays locked in that grief forever? What if she looks back in 10 years and realizes she wasted her teenage years being miserable when she could have been healing? Bobby's voice was firm, but kind. "Rebecca was my friend too, Dan. And I know for a fact she wouldn't want Jessica living like this. She'd want her daughter to embrace life, to find joy again, even if it hurts at first." The truth in Bobby's words resonated deep within Daniel. Rebecca had been a force of life, vibrant, optimistic, always finding reasons to smile, even when facing her own mortality. During her final weeks, she'd made Daniel promise to take care of Jessica, to make sure their daughter lived fully, and didn't let grief consume her. "You're right," Daniel admitted. "Becca would be furious if she saw how we've been living, like ghosts in our own house. So what are you going to do?" Daniel set down the wrench and stood up straighter, a determination settling over him. "I'm going to that concert, and I'm going to ask Jessica one more time to come with me. But this time, I'm going to be honest with her about why it matters. No more tiptoeing around the pain." Bobby grinned and clapped him on the shoulder. "That's what I like to hear. The tickets are yours, man. December 22nd, 7 o'clock, at the AT&T Center." That evening, Daniel arrived home to find Jessica in the kitchen, making herself a sandwich. It was the first time in days he'd seen her anywhere other than her bedroom. "Hey," he said, trying to keep his tone casual. "Making dinner?" "Just a snack," Jessica replied without looking at him. Daniel opened the refrigerator and pulled out ingredients for his own sandwich, a plan forming in his mind. Instead of another confrontation, maybe he could try a different approach. Just being present, sharing space without pressure. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the sounds of bread being sliced and condiments being spread, filling the quiet kitchen. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I've been thinking about your mom a lot this week." Jessica's hands paused briefly before continuing to spread mayo on her bread. "I was remembering this one time about 6 years ago," Daniel continued, his voice soft with the memory. "We were driving back from Austin after visiting your Aunt Patricia. You were asleep in the back seat. A George Strait song came on the radio. Amarillo by Morning, I think. And your mom turned it up and started singing along. Despite herself, Jessica glanced at her father. She had this smile on her face, Daniel said, a sad smile crossing his own lips. Pure joy. She looked over at me and said, "Danny, if I could live in any moment forever, it would be this one. Right here, with my family, with this music, just driving through Texas under the stars." And I remember thinking how lucky I was to have her. Jessica's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been afraid," Daniel admitted. Afraid of those memories. Afraid that remembering the good times would make losing her hurt more. But this week, I realized something. By avoiding those memories, by shutting out the music and the joy she brought to our lives, I'm losing her all over again, every single day. A tear rolled down Jessica's cheek. She quickly wiped it away. The George Strait concert. It's not about making you forget the pain, Jess. It's about remembering that there was more to your mom than her death. There was her life, her laughter, her love for that music. And maybe, just maybe, we can honor that together. Jessica was quiet for a long moment, her sandwich forgotten on the counter. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What if it hurts too much?" "Then it hurts," Daniel said gently, "and we'll get through it together." That's what your mom would want. Not for us to avoid pain, but to face it side by side. Jessica looked at her father, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. She saw the grief etched into his features, the exhaustion in his eyes, but also something else, a determination, a willingness to be vulnerable. "I don't know if I can," she said honestly. "I'm not asking you to decide right now," Daniel replied. "The concert is December 22nd. That's just over a week away. Just think about it. That's all I ask." Jessica nodded slowly. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't the immediate no she'd given before. It was something, a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. They ate their sandwiches together at the kitchen table, the silence between them now less hostile and more contemplative. When Jessica went back upstairs to her room, Daniel felt the smallest glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally said the right thing. The following Saturday, Linda Pearson invited Daniel over for coffee. She'd been working in her front yard, planting winter pansies in decorative pots, when Daniel came home from running errands. "You look like you could use a break," she called out, waving him over. "I just made a fresh pot of coffee, and I bought way too many of those cinnamon rolls from the bakery on Commerce Street." Daniel smiled. Linda's invitations always came at exactly the right time, as if she had some sixth sense for when he needed human interaction. Her house was the mirror image of his in layout, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Where Daniel's home felt frozen in time, still decorated with Rebecca's touches and family photos, Linda's was vibrant and constantly evolving. The walls displayed student artwork and framed literary quotes. Books were everywhere, on shelves, stacked on tables, piled on the floor. "I'm a teacher," Linda said with a laugh when she noticed Daniel looking at the stacks. "We hoard books like dragons hoard gold." Occupational hazard. They settled in her living room, mugs of coffee in hand and cinnamon rolls on small plates. Outside, the December afternoon was gray and cool, the kind of day that invited staying indoors. "How are things with Jessica?" Linda asked. Daniel told her about the conversation in the kitchen, about the slight thaw in his daughter's demeanor. Linda listened intently, her teacher's instincts picking up on nuances. "That's progress," she said when he finished. "Real, genuine progress. You're giving her space to process while still extending the invitation. That's exactly what she needs." "I just hope she decides to come," Daniel admitted. "Bobby went through a lot of trouble to get those tickets. And honestly, I think this could be really important for both of us." Linda was quiet for a moment, her fingers wrapped around her coffee mug. "Can I share something with you?" A teacher's perspective? Of course. I see a lot of kids Jessica's age. Teenagers are fascinating creatures. They're caught between childhood and adulthood, trying to figure out who they are while dealing with all these intense emotions they don't know how to process. When you add trauma, like losing a parent, it becomes exponentially more complicated. She set down her mug and leaned forward slightly. What I've noticed is that teenagers often need permission to feel joy again after experiencing loss. They feel guilty about being happy, as if happiness somehow betrays the person they lost. Jessica might be afraid that if she goes to that concert and enjoys herself, it means she's forgetting her mom or moving on too quickly. Daniel hadn't thought about it that way, but it made perfect sense. So, what do? You do exactly what you did in the kitchen. You give her permission. You show her that remembering with joy doesn't diminish the love or the loss. You model it for her. They talked for another hour, the conversation drifting from Jessica to work, from memories of Rebecca to Linda's experiences as a teacher. Daniel found himself laughing at one of Linda's stories about a student who'd turned in an essay written entirely in emojis, claiming it was modern hieroglyphics. It was creative, I'll give him that, Linda said, grinning. But I still made him rewrite it in actual words. When Daniel finally headed back to his own house, he felt lighter. Linda had a gift for making him feel less alone in his struggles, for reminding him that life could still hold moments of genuine connection and laughter. The days leading up to December 22nd passed with agonizing slowness. Jessica hadn't given Daniel an answer about the concert, but he noticed small changes in her behavior. She came out of her room more often. She ate meals with him a few times. Once, he even heard her humming in the shower. Not a country song, but music nonetheless. On December 20th, 2 days before the concert, Daniel was in the garage organizing tools when Jessica appeared in the doorway. She stood there awkwardly, hands shoved in her hoodie pockets. "Dad!" He looked up, surprised. "Yeah, honey? I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." Daniel set down the socket wrench he'd been holding. "Okay, do you really want to go to this concert? Or are you just doing it because you think it's what I need?" It was a perceptive question, the kind that showed Jessica was her mother's daughter, cutting through pretense to get to the truth. "Honestly," Daniel said, "a little of both. I think we both need it. I think your mom would want us to go, but I also genuinely want to experience it. Your mom tried for years to get me to appreciate George Strait the way she did. I always said I liked his music fine, but I never really listened, you know? I took it for granted because I thought we'd have forever." Jessica's expression softened slightly. She used to get so annoyed when you'd talk during her favorite songs. Daniel laughed. "She'd throw popcorn at me during the movie if I talked too. Remember?" A small smile tugged at Jessica's lips, the first genuine smile Daniel had seen in months. She had really good aim. "That she did." Daniel paused, then asked, "Why are you asking, Jess?" Jessica took a deep breath. "Because I think I want to go. To the concert. With you." Daniel felt his heart swell. "Yeah? Yeah. But Dad, I need you to understand something. I'm scared. I'm scared it's going to hurt. I'm scared I'm going to cry the whole time and embarrass myself. I'm scared that I'm not ready." Daniel crossed the garage and put his hands on his daughter's shoulders, looking directly into her eyes, Rebecca's eyes. "Then we'll be scared together. And if you cry, I'll probably cry too. And that's okay. We'll get through it. Together." Jessica nodded, tears already forming. "Okay, let's do it. Let's go see George Strait. For Mom." Daniel pulled her into a hug, and for the first time in 2 years, Jessica didn't pull away. She wrapped her arms around her father and held on tight, Both of them crying, both of them grieving, but both of them finally together in it. "Your mom would be so proud of you," Daniel whispered into Jessica's hair. "I miss her so much, Dad." "I know, honey. I miss her too. Every single day." They stood in the garage, holding each other as the December afternoon faded into evening. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, preparing for the approaching holidays. Inside the Crawford garage, a father and daughter took their first real steps toward healing. December 21st arrived with unusual warmth for a San Antonio winter. The temperature climbed to 65 degrees by midday, and the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. Daniel closed the shop early, telling Bobby he needed time to prepare for tomorrow's concert. "Big day tomorrow," Bobby said with a knowing grin. "You nervous?" "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "What if it's too much for her? What if she has a breakdown in the middle of the concert?" Bobby clapped him on the back. "Then you'll handle it. You're her father. You'll do what needs to be done. But Dan, I really think this is going to be good. For both of you." At home, Daniel found Jessica in her room, sitting on her bed surrounded by piles of clothes. She looked up when he knocked on the open door. "I don't know what to wear tomorrow," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "I know it's stupid to worry about clothes when there are bigger things to think about. But I don't know." Daniel smiled. It was such a normal teenage concern, so wonderfully ordinary after months of heavy emotional conversations. "Your mom always wore her boots and jeans to anything country music related," he suggested. "Said it was the proper uniform." Jessica looked at her closet thoughtfully. "I have those brown cowboy boots she bought me 2 Christmases ago. I've never worn them." "Why not?" "Because she bought them," Jessica said quietly. "It felt like if I wore them out, I'd wear them out. You know? Like I'd use up the last thing she gave me." Daniel understood completely. He still had Rebecca's favorite coffee mug in the cabinet, never using it for the same reason. "What if we think about it differently?" he suggested. "What if wearing those boots tomorrow is a way of bringing her with us? Of honoring the gift she gave you?" Jessica considered this, then got up and pulled the boots from the back of her closet. They were beautiful. Genuine leather with intricate stitching. The kind Rebecca had always admired in store windows but rarely bought for herself. "She would have loved tomorrow," Jessica said, running her fingers over the leather. "She talked about seeing George Strait live for as long as I can remember. She said it was on her bucket list." Daniel sat on the edge of Jessica's bed. "Tell me your favorite memory of your mom and music." Jessica sat down beside him, the boots still in her hands. "There are so many, but I think my favorite was this random Tuesday night when I was maybe 13. It was just a regular night. Nothing special. Mom was making dinner, and All My Exes Live in Texas came on her playlist. She grabbed my hands and pulled me into the kitchen, and we danced around like idiots, singing at the top of our lungs. Dad, she was laughing so hard she was crying. And I remember thinking, I want to be exactly like her when I grow up. Daniel's own eyes welled up. You are like her, Jess. More than you know. You have her spirit, her strength. This past 2 years, you've been so strong. I haven't been strong, Jessica interrupted. I've been awful to you. I've been closed off and mean and... You've been grieving, Daniel said firmly. There's no right or wrong way to do that. No timeline, no rules. You've been doing the best you can, and that's all anyone can ask. They sat together in comfortable silence, the afternoon sun streaming through Jessica's bedroom window. On the walls were posters of bands and movies, remnants of the girl she'd been before loss had redefined her world. But there, on her bookshelf, Daniel noticed something new. A framed photo of Rebecca that hadn't been there before. When did you put that up? He asked, nodding toward it. Jessica followed his gaze. Last week, after our talk in the kitchen, I realized I'd been hiding all her pictures because seeing them hurt. But then I thought about what you said about losing her all over again by shutting her out. So I put that one up. It's my favorite picture of her. In the photo, Rebecca was in their backyard, gardening. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, dirt smudged on her cheek, and she was looking at the camera with this expression of pure, unguarded happiness. It had been taken about 3 years ago, before the diagnosis. "It's perfect," Daniel said. That evening, Linda came over with homemade lasagna. She'd developed a habit of bringing meals on weekends, claiming she was testing recipes, but clearly just making sure Daniel and Jessica were eating properly. "Big day tomorrow," Linda said as they set the table. "How are you both feeling?" "Nervous," Jessica admitted, surprising both Daniel and Linda with her openness. "But also kind of excited? Is that weird?" "Not weird at all," Linda assured her. "It's healthy. You're allowed to feel multiple things at once. Grief and excitement can coexist." They ate dinner together, the three of them, conversation flowing more easily than it had in months. Linda told stories about her students' holiday concert disasters. Jessica talked about her history class project, and Daniel shared a funny story about Mrs. Kowalski's reaction to the repaired truck. "She tried to pay me in homemade pierogies," Daniel said, laughing. "I told her cash or card would be fine, but she insisted. Said her pierogies were worth more than money." "Were they?" Linda asked. "Actually, yes. They were incredible." After dinner, as they cleared the table, Jessica excused herself to finish homework. When she was upstairs, Linda turned to Daniel. "She seems different," she observed. "Lighter, somehow. The concert hasn't even happened yet. But I think just having something to look forward to has helped," Daniel said. "Or maybe it's that we're finally talking about Rebecca, instead of avoiding her memory." "You're doing a great job, Daniel. I know it doesn't always feel like it, but you are." Linda left around 8:30, and Daniel spent the rest of the evening trying to relax. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this anxious about something. Tomorrow could be transformative or catastrophic, and there was no way to know which until it happened. December 22nd dawned cold and crisp. Daniel woke at his usual 5:30, but stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling. The concert wasn't until 7, but he was already running through everything that could go wrong. By 9 o'clock, both he and Jessica were awake, moving through the house with nervous energy. They attempted breakfast, but neither had much appetite. "We should leave by 6, Daniel said. "The AT&T Center is only 20 minutes away, but Bobby said parking can be crazy for big shows, and we have the meet and greet passes for 6:30. Jessica's eyes widened. "Meet and greet? Like we're meeting George Strait?" Daniel had forgotten he hadn't mentioned that detail. "Bobby came through with VIP passes. If you're not comfortable with it, we don't have to do that part. We can just go to our seats." "No," Jessica said quickly. "No, I want to. Mom would have... She would have died to meet him." She paused, realizing what she'd said. "You know what I mean." The day passed in slow motion. Daniel tried to work on some paperwork for the shop but couldn't focus. Jessica attempted to read but kept staring at the same page. They were both counting down the hours, anticipation and anxiety building with each passing minute. At 4 o'clock, Jessica started getting ready. Daniel heard the shower running, heard her moving around in her room. At 5, she emerged wearing jeans, the brown cowboy boots Rebecca had given her, and a dark green blouse that brought out her eyes. "You look beautiful," Daniel said, "just like your mom." Jessica smiled, genuinely smiled. "Thanks, Dad. Are you going to change?" Daniel looked down at his worn jeans and flannel shirt. "What's wrong with this?" "Nothing," if you're going to work. But we're going to see the king of country. You should at least wear a nice shirt." Amused by her sudden concern with appearance, Daniel changed into dark jeans and a button-down shirt Rebecca had bought him years ago that he'd rarely worn. When he came back downstairs, Jessica nodded approvingly. "Much better. Now we look like we belong at a George Strait concert." At 5:45, they climbed into Daniel's Ford Explorer. The drive to the AT&T Center was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, while Jessica stared out the window at the passing cityscape of San Antonio. As they approached the venue, Daniel could see the crowds already gathering. The AT&T Center, home to the San Antonio Spurs and countless major events, was lit up against the darkening sky, an enormous beacon drawing thousands of country music fans from across Texas and beyond. "It's huge," Jessica breathed, taking in the massive structure. They parked in the VIP lot, Bobby's cousin having included a parking pass with the tickets. As they walked toward the entrance, Daniel felt Jessica reach for his hand. She hadn't held his hand in years, not since she was a little girl. The gesture almost undid him. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm scared," Jessica admitted. "But I'm glad I'm here. With you." "Me too, honey. Me too." They showed their VIP passes at a special entrance and were directed to a cordoned-off area where about 20 other people were waiting. The meet and greet was scheduled for 6:30, with the concert starting at 7:30. A staff member explained that they'd have about 2 minutes each with George Strait, could take one photo, and could bring one item to be signed. Jessica's hand tightened in Daniel's. "We didn't bring anything to sign," she whispered. "That's okay. We'll just take a photo." At 6:25, the staff member asked everyone to form a line. Daniel and Jessica found themselves about halfway back. The woman in front of them was probably in her 60s, wearing a bedazzled denim jacket with George Strait's name on the back. "Is this your first time seeing him?" she asked Jessica kindly. Jessica nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Oh, honey, you're in for a treat. I've seen him 17 times. Never gets old. That man is country music royalty." When it was finally their turn, Daniel's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. They walked around a curtain into a small area where George Strait stood, looking exactly like he did in all the photos. Cowboy hat, warm smile, genuine presence. "Evening, folks," he said in that distinctive voice. "I'm George. What are your names?" "Daniel Crawford," Daniel managed. "And this is my daughter, Jessica." George shook both their hands. "Pleasure to meet you both. You from San Antonio?" "Yes, sir," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Born and raised," Daniel added. "Best city in Texas," George said with a grin. "What brings you out tonight?" Daniel glanced at Jessica, who seemed frozen. He took a breath and decided on honesty. "My wife was your biggest fan, Mr. Strait. She passed away 2 years ago from cancer. She always dreamed of seeing you perform live, but never got the chance. Jessica and I are here to honor her memory." George's expression shifted to one of genuine compassion. "I'm real sorry for your loss." "What was her name?" "Rebecca," Jessica said, finding her voice. "Her name was Rebecca, and she loved your music more than anything. Our wedding song was 'I Cross My Heart.'" George nodded thoughtfully. "That's a beautiful song. I'm honored it was part of your special day." He looked at Jessica directly. "Losing someone you love is about the hardest thing in the world, but bringing her memory with you tonight, celebrating what she loved, that's a powerful thing. Your mama would be real proud of you both." Tears were streaming down Jessica's face now, but she was smiling. "Thank you, Mr. Strait. That means everything." They took their photo, Daniel and Jessica on either side of George Strait. all three smiling despite the tears. And then their time was up. As they walked away, Jessica was openly crying. But Daniel could tell they were healing tears, not just grieving ones. "He was so nice," Jessica said, wiping her eyes. "Mom would have lost her mind." "She's probably losing her mind right now," Daniel said, putting his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Looking down and seeing you just met George Strait." They found their seats. Front section, dead center, incredible view of the stage. The arena was filling rapidly, the excited chatter of thousands of fans creating a buzz of anticipation. Jessica clutched the photo they'd just taken, looking at it repeatedly as if to convince herself it had really happened. At 7:30, the lights dimmed. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Daniel Crawford, sitting next to his daughter in the AT&T Center in San Antonio, Texas, felt Rebecca's presence stronger than he had in 2 years. The show was about to begin. The roar of the crowd was deafening as the lights in the AT&T Center dimmed completely, plunging the massive arena into darkness. Jessica gripped the armrest of her seat with one hand and her father's hand with the other, her heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Around them, 18,000 fans were on their feet, the energy in the room electric and palpable. A single spotlight illuminated the stage, and then there he was, George Strait, guitar in hand, that iconic cowboy hat perfectly positioned, looking like the very embodiment of country music itself. The opening notes of Heartland filled the arena, and the crowd's cheers somehow grew even louder. Jessica felt her breath catch in her throat. She'd listened to this song hundreds of times, knew every word, every note. But hearing it live, in this moment, with these thousands of people who all shared a love for this music, it was overwhelming in ways she hadn't anticipated. Beside her, Daniel was equally transfixed. He'd heard George Strait's music countless times over the years, but always as background noise, as Rebecca's music. Now, actually listening, actually being present for it, he understood what she'd loved so much. There was something authentic about it, something real and unpretentious. As the first song concluded and transitioned into Unwound, Jessica found herself singing along, almost unconsciously. The lyrics came automatically, muscle memory from years of listening with her mother. When she realized what she was doing, she almost stopped, almost choked on the emotion. But then she felt her father's hand squeeze hers, and she kept singing. Daniel watched his daughter out of the corner of his eye, saw her lips moving with the words, saw the tears on her cheeks that she didn't bother to wipe away. She looked so much like Rebecca in that moment, the same expression Rebecca used to get when listening to music she loved, that transported look of someone fully immersed in the experience. "Your mama is singing along too," Daniel leaned over and whispered in Jessica's ear. "I guarantee it." Jessica nodded, unable to speak, but she smiled through her tears. George Strait moved through his catalog with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this for over 4 decades. Each song was delivered with professional precision, but also with genuine feeling. He chatted with the crowd between numbers, his Texas drawl and easy humor making the massive arena feel intimate. "Y'all are a great crowd tonight," George said after finishing The Cowboy Rides Away. "San Antonio always has been. This city feels like home every time I come here." The crowd roared its approval. "I want to do something a little different tonight," George continued, and the arena quieted, curious. "Earlier, I met some wonderful folks who reminded me why I do this, why this music matters. They reminded me that songs aren't just entertainment. They're memories, they're connections, they're the soundtrack to people's lives." Jessica sat up straighter, her heart beginning to pound. "There was a father and daughter who came to the meet and greet tonight," George went on. They lost someone very dear to them, someone who loved this music and never got to see a show. They're here tonight to honor her memory. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. Surely George wasn't talking about them. Surely he wasn't. Daniel and Jessica Crawford, if you're out there, this next one's for you. And for Rebecca. The opening notes of "I Cross My Heart" filled the arena. Jessica completely broke down, her hands covering her face as sobs racked her body. Daniel pulled her close, his own vision blurred with tears. All around them, people were crying too, moved by the emotion of the moment, even without knowing the full story. As George Strait sang their wedding song, the song that had played during Daniel and Rebecca's first dance as a married couple, Daniel was transported back to that day 20 years ago. Rebecca, in her simple but beautiful white dress, her eyes shining with joy and love. The way she'd rested her head on his shoulder as they swayed to this very song, whispering, "This is the happiest day of my life. I cross my heart and promise to give all I've got to give to make all your dreams come true. In all the world, you'll never find a love as true as mine." The lyrics had been their vows to each other, promises they'd kept until cancer had forced them apart. And now, hearing them in this arena, with his daughter crying in his arms, Daniel realized that the love hadn't ended with Rebecca's death. It was still here, in Jessica, in the memories, in moments like this. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. George tipped his hat toward where Daniel and Jessica were sitting. Somehow he'd known, or his staff had told him where they'd be, and mouthed, "Thank you." Jessica waved, still crying but also laughing, overwhelmed by the generosity of the gesture. "Oh my God, Dad," she said, her voice thick with emotion. That was... "I know," Daniel said, because there were no words adequate to describe what they'd just experienced. The concert continued, each song building on the last. George performed "Amarillo by Morning," and Daniel remembered Rebecca singing it on that drive from Austin. He performed "All My Exes Live in Texas," and Jessica remembered dancing in the kitchen with her mother on that random Tuesday night. Song after song, memory after memory, the music weaving together past and present, loss and love, grief and joy. During Check Yes or No, people throughout the arena were dancing, and Daniel surprised himself by standing up and pulling Jessica to her feet. "Come on," he said. "Your mom would want us to dance." "Dad, I don't know." "Neither do I. But let's do it anyway." They danced awkwardly, neither of them particularly coordinated, stepping on each other's feet and laughing. It was imperfect and silly and absolutely perfect. Around them, other families were dancing too, the entire arena celebrating together. As the concert moved into its final third, Daniel noticed something remarkable. Jessica was singing along to every song, no longer crying, just immersed in the music. Her face had lost that tight, guarded expression she'd worn for 2 years. She looked young again, looked like the girl she'd been before loss had aged her. George performed "Troubadour," and the lyrics seemed especially poignant. "I was a young troubadour when I rode in on a song, and I'll be an old troubadour when I'm gone." There was something about the continuity it suggested, the idea that music and memory persisted beyond individual lives, that resonated deeply. For the encore, George came back out to perform "The Chair," one of his earliest hits. The crowd was on its feet, singing along, 18,000 voices joining together in this shared experience. When the final notes faded and the lights came up, the standing ovation seemed to go on forever. George Strait took his bows, waved to the crowd, and disappeared backstage. The spell was broken, but its effects lingered. Jessica and Daniel remained in their seats as people began filing out, neither of them quite ready to leave. to return to the regular world. "Thank you, Dad," Jessica finally said, her voice hoarse from singing and crying. "Thank you for making me come. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for trusting me," Daniel replied, "for taking the leap even though you were scared." "I felt her here tonight," Jessica said quietly. "Mom, I felt like she was here with us, experiencing this." "Me too." They sat in silence for a few more minutes, watching the arena empty, holding on to the magic of the evening for as long as possible. Finally, they stood and made their way toward the exits, moving with the last stragglers of the crowd. Outside, the December night was cold and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. The parking lot was chaotic with departing vehicles, but Daniel and Jessica weren't in a hurry. They walked slowly to the Explorer, both lost in their own thoughts. As Daniel drove home, Jessica connected her phone to the car's Bluetooth system. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked. "Something I haven't done in 2 years." George Strait's voice filled the car, singing, "I Saw God Today." Jessica leaned back in her seat, her eyes closed, a peaceful expression on her face. Daniel reached over and took her hand, and they drove through San Antonio like that, connected by touch, by music, by shared grief and shared healing. When they arrived home, it was nearly 11 o'clock. They were both exhausted, emotionally drained, but in a good way, like after a deep cry that leaves you feeling lighter. "Mom would have loved tonight so much," Jessica said as they walked into the house. "She did love it," Daniel said with certainty. "Wherever she is, she loved every second of it." Jessica hugged her father tightly before heading upstairs. "Good night, Dad. I love you." "I love you too, honey. More than you know." The morning after the concert, Daniel woke to an unfamiliar sound. Humming. He lay in bed for a moment, trying to identify the source, and then realized it was coming from Jessica's room. She was humming a George Strait song. He smiled and got out of bed, feeling more rested than he had in months, despite the late night. When he went downstairs, he found Jessica already in the kitchen, making breakfast. Actually making breakfast. Not just grabbing a piece of fruit and running out the door. "Morning," she said brightly when she saw him. "I'm making pancakes. Real ones, not frozen." Daniel leaned against the doorway, watching his daughter move around the kitchen with an ease he hadn't seen in years. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion. I just woke up feeling, I don't know, different, better." She flipped a pancake expertly. "Is that weird? To feel better after one concert?" "Not weird at all," Daniel said, moving to pour himself coffee. "Sometimes one moment can shift your entire perspective. Last night was pretty special." They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table, talking about the concert, their favorite songs, the incredible moment when George Strait had dedicated "I Cross My Heart" to them. The feeling of being in that massive arena with so many other fans. "I want to tell you something," Jessica said after a while, setting down her fork. "I've been so angry for so long. At Mom for dying. At you for not being her. At God or the universe or whoever's in charge for taking her away. And I pushed you away because it was easier to be alone with my anger than to risk feeling anything else." Daniel listened, not interrupting. "But last night, when we were there, when George was singing Mom's favorite songs and everyone was singing along, I realized something. Mom's not gone. Not really. She's in the music, in the memories, in us. And by shutting out everything that reminded me of her, I was losing her more than death already had." "That's very wise, Jess," Daniel said softly. "I don't want to lose any more of her," Jessica continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I want to remember. I want to talk about her. I want to listen to her favorite songs and wear the boots she bought me, and tell stories about the funny things she did. I want to keep her alive in the ways we still can." Daniel reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "That's exactly what she would want. And I want that too. I've been afraid of the memories. But you're right. They're all we have left. We should treasure them, not hide from them." They spent the rest of the morning looking through old photo albums, something they hadn't done since the funeral. They laughed at pictures of Rebecca with terrible early 2000s fashion choices, at family vacation photos where everyone was sunburned and happy, at candid moments captured without planning. "Look at this one," Jessica said, pointing to a photo of Rebecca and 7-year-old Jessica at a county fair. Both were eating cotton candy. Both had it all over their faces. Both were grinning from ear to ear. "I remember this day. We rode the Ferris wheel 5 times because Mom loved seeing the view from the top." "Your mom was never afraid of heights," Daniel said. "She was never afraid of much, actually. Except spiders. Those terrified her. Remember when we found that huge one in the bathroom and she made you come home from work to deal with it?" Jessica laughed at the memory. "It was the size of a quarter. And she called me like the house was on fire," Daniel said, laughing too. "I got home and she was standing on the toilet, armed with a can of hairspray like it was a weapon. They traded stories for hours, the house filling with laughter for the first time in 2 years. It felt good, felt healing, to remember Rebecca not just as the woman who'd died, but as the woman who'd lived. Funny, imperfect, wonderfully human. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Daniel opened it to find Bobby standing there with a wide grin. "So?" Bobby asked without preamble. "How was it? Don't leave me in suspense, man." Daniel invited him in, and together with Jessica, they told Bobby about the concert. Bobby's eyes widened when they described George Strait dedicating "I Cross My Heart" to them. "No way. The king of country himself called you out in front of 18,000 people." "It was incredible," Jessica said, showing Bobby the photo from the meet and greet on her phone. "He was so kind, so genuine. And the concert itself was... I don't even have words. It was everything Mom would have wanted it to be." Bobby looked at Daniel, and something passed between the two friends. An understanding, a recognition that something fundamental had shifted. "I'm really glad it worked out," Bobby said quietly. "Becca would have been proud of you both." After Bobby left, Linda came over with cookies she'd baked with her niece. Jessica answered the door and invited her in with genuine warmth, a marked change from the polite but distant way she'd treated Linda before. "We went to the concert last night," Jessica told her excitedly. "It was amazing. We met George Strait, and he dedicated a song to us, and Dad and I danced, and I sang along to every song." Linda's smile was radiant. "That's wonderful, Jessica. I'm so happy for you both." They sat in the living room, the 3 of them, and Jessica showed Linda the photo and told her the whole story. Linda listened with the attentive presence of someone who genuinely cared, asking questions and laughing at the funny parts and tearing up at the emotional ones. "Your mother must have been something special," Linda said to Jessica at one point. "She was," Jessica agreed. "She was the best." When Linda left an hour later, Daniel walked her to the door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything you've done for us these past 2 years. For the meals, for the support, for just being there. I don't think I ever properly thanked you." "You don't need to thank me," Linda replied. "That's what neighbors are for. What friends are for." She paused, then added, "You look different today. Lighter. I feel different. We both do. It's like we've been holding our breath for 2 years, and we can finally exhale." Linda smiled and touched his arm briefly. "I'm glad. You both deserve peace and happiness." On Christmas Eve, 3 days after the concert, Daniel and Jessica decided to visit Rebecca's grave. They hadn't been since the one-year anniversary of her death. It had been too painful. But now, armed with new perspective and healing hearts, they felt ready. San Fernando Cemetery was quiet and peaceful, decorated here and there with holiday flowers and wreaths left by other families. Rebecca's headstone was simple but elegant. Rebecca Ann Crawford, beloved wife and mother. 1983-2023. Her love was our music. Daniel and Jessica stood before the grave, each holding a single white rose. The December afternoon was cool but not cold, and the sky was a brilliant blue. "Hi, Mom," Jessica said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "We went to see George Strait. Dad got us VIP tickets, and we met him, and he was so nice. He dedicated 'I Cross My Heart' to us. To you, really. It was the most incredible night of my life." Daniel placed his rose on the grave. "We miss you, Becca, every day. But we're doing better. We're talking about you, remembering the good times. Jessica's listening to your music again. The house doesn't feel so empty anymore. I'm going to live the way you would want me to," Jessica continued, placing her own rose next to her father's. "I'm going to embrace life and find joy and not hide from things that remind me of you. Because those reminders are gifts, not punishments. They're proof that you were here, that you mattered, that you're still with us in all the ways that count." They stood there for a long time, comfortable in the silence, feeling connected to Rebecca and to each other. When they finally walked back to the car, Daniel put his arm around Jessica's shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Jessica said. "I really am." On New Year's Eve, Daniel closed the shop early. He came home to find Jessica cooking dinner. Actual cooking. Following one of Rebecca's old recipes that she'd found in the kitchen drawer. "Mom's famous chicken enchiladas," Jessica announced. "I figured we should ring in the new year with something she loved making." They ate together, just the two of them. And the meal was delicious, even if it wasn't quite as perfect as Rebecca's had been. "Practice makes perfect," Jessica said, with a laugh when Daniel diplomatically suggested it could use a bit more cumin. "I'll get better." At 11:30, they bundled up and went into the backyard. The night was clear and cold, perfect for stargazing. They spread out blankets on the lawn chairs and lay back, looking up at the vast Texas sky. "Make a wish for the new year," Daniel said as midnight approached. Jessica was quiet for a moment. "I wish for us to keep healing, to keep remembering Mom in good ways, to keep moving forward without feeling guilty about it." "That's a good wish," Daniel said. "I wish for the same thing. And I wish for you to find happiness and joy again, to embrace being 16 and all the possibilities that come with it." Somewhere in the neighborhood, fireworks began popping. In the distance, they could hear people celebrating. Daniel and Jessica lay on their lawn chairs, holding hands across the gap between them, watching the sky light up with color. "Happy New Year, Dad." "Happy New Year, honey." It wasn't a perfect new year. They were still grieving, still healing, still navigating life without Rebecca. But it was a new beginning, a fresh start, a chance to honor the past while embracing the future. On the first Monday of the new year, Jessica returned to school with a different energy. Her friend Natalie Wilson noticed immediately. "You seem different," Natalie said at lunch. "Good different." "I feel different," Jessica admitted. "I went to a George Strait concert with my dad right before Christmas. It sounds stupid, but it kind of changed everything." "How?" Jessica thought about how to explain it. "It reminded me that my mom wouldn't want me to be miserable forever. She'd want me to live, to find joy, to remember her with happiness instead of just pain. And it helped my dad and me reconnect. We'd been like strangers living in the same house, and now we're actually talking again." Natalie hugged her friend. "I'm really glad, Jess. I've been worried about you." "I know. And I'm sorry I've been so closed off. I'm going to do better." That afternoon, when Daniel picked Jessica up from school, she was actually smiling. "Good day?" he asked. "Really good," she said. "I joined the school choir. We're doing a spring concert, and I thought maybe I'd like to sing again. Mom always said I had a good voice." Daniel felt his heart swell with pride and joy. She did say that, and she was right. "I think that's wonderful, Jess." As January turned into February, the Crawford household continued its transformation. Music filled the house again, George Strait certainly, but also other artists, other genres. Jessica started inviting friends over, something she hadn't done since before Rebecca's death. Daniel found himself laughing more, smiling more, feeling more present in his own life. One evening in mid-February, as they were finishing dinner, Jessica looked at her father with a serious expression. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Okay," Daniel said, immediately concerned. "Linda, our neighbor Linda, do you have feelings for her?" Daniel was completely blindsided by the question. "What? No. I mean, she's a friend. A good friend. But, Dad," Jessica interrupted gently, "it's okay if you do. I've seen the way you look at her, the way you smile when she comes over, and I've seen the way she looks at you. Jess, I loved your mother. I know you did. I know you do. But Dad, Mom's gone, and she wouldn't want you to be alone forever. She'd want you to be happy, to find love again if it comes along." Daniel was stunned. His 16-year-old daughter was giving him permission to move on, to consider the possibility of happiness with someone else. "I don't know if Linda sees me that way," he said quietly. "Only one way to find out," Jessica said, with a knowing smile that reminded him so much of Rebecca, it hurt. "Maybe ask her to dinner. A real dinner. Just the two of you." "When did you get so wise?" "I have a good teacher," Jessica said. "Well, had a good teacher. But her lessons stuck." The following Saturday, Daniel stood on Linda's front porch, feeling more nervous than he'd felt in years. He'd rehearsed what to say a dozen times, but now that he was actually here, every word fled his mind. Linda opened the door, wearing jeans and a casual sweater, her hair pulled back. No makeup. She looked beautiful. "Daniel, hi," she said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's fine," he said quickly. I wanted to ask you something. Would you maybe want to have dinner with me sometime? Like a real dinner. Just the two of us. Not as neighbors or friends, but as more than that?" Linda's expression shifted from surprise to something softer, warmer. "Are you asking me on a date, Daniel Crawford?" "I guess I am. And I'm doing a terrible job of it." Linda laughed. "Actually, I think you're doing just fine. And yes, I would love to have dinner with you." Daniel felt relief wash over him. "Yeah? Yeah. I've been hoping you'd ask for a while now, but I didn't want to push. I know you've been through so much." "Jessica actually encouraged me to ask you," Daniel admitted. "Said Rebecca wouldn't want me to be alone forever." "Your daughter is very wise," Linda said, "just like her mother was." They stood there on Linda's porch, smiling at each other like teenagers, both of them recognizing that this was the start of something new. Not a replacement for what was lost, but a different chapter. A new possibility. On March 15th, 3 months after the George Strait concert that had changed everything, Daniel and Jessica returned to the AT&T Center. George Strait wasn't performing. The night was a different show, but they'd wanted to come back, to revisit the place where their healing had truly begun. They stood in the parking lot, looking up at the massive venue. "I'll never forget that night," Jessica said. "It will always be one of the most important nights of my life." "Mine too," Daniel agreed. "It gave us back to each other. It gave us back your mom's memory in a way we could embrace instead of hide from." They walked around the perimeter of the building, remembering. Then they got back in the car and drove to their favorite spot, a small park near the San Antonio River, where Rebecca used to take Jessica when she was little. They sat on a bench watching the water flow, comfortable in each other's presence, no longer afraid of silence or memories. "I have something for you," Daniel said, pulling a small wrapped box from his jacket pocket. Jessica opened it to find a delicate silver necklace with a small charm, a musical note. "It was your mom's," Daniel explained. "She wore it when we were dating. I found it in her jewelry box, and I thought you should have it. So she's always close to your heart." Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the necklace around her neck. "It's perfect, Dad. Thank you. Your mom would be so proud of you, Jess, of the young woman you're becoming, of how you've faced your grief and come through it stronger." "I had a good example," Jessica said. "Both of my parents showed me what strength looks like, what love looks like. Mom in how she lived and how she faced her illness. You in how you kept going, kept trying to reach me even when I pushed you away." They sat together as the March afternoon faded into evening, the San Antonio sky painting itself in shades of orange and pink. Life wasn't perfect. They still had hard days, still missed Rebecca with an ache that never fully went away. But they had each other. They had their memories, and they had hope for the future. And every now and then, when they needed to feel close to Rebecca, they'd put on George Strait's music and let the songs transport them back to that December night when everything changed. When an unexpected concert became a catalyst for healing. When the king of country reminded a grieving father and daughter that love and memory could coexist with joy and hope. Nobody had expected anything different from that concert. Just a good show, a pleasant evening. But George Strait, with his authentic presence and timeless music, had transformed it into something unforgettable. He'd given the Crawford family a gift more valuable than any performance. He'd given them permission to remember with joy, to honor the past while embracing the future, to find music in life again, after silence had reigned too long. As Daniel and Jessica drove home that evening, George Strait's voice filled the car once more. Jessica sang along, her voice clear and strong, no longer choked by grief. Daniel joined in, his voice off-key but enthusiastic, and somewhere, perhaps, Rebecca was singing too. Her memory alive in the music, in her family, in the love that death could dim but never extinguish. The story of the Crawfords wasn't just about loss. It was about resilience, about the power of shared experiences, about how sometimes one perfect night can illuminate the path forward when you've been lost in darkness. It was about a father and daughter who found their way back to each other through the universal language of music, guided by a legendary performer who reminded them that life, despite its heartbreaks, was still worth celebrating. And every time they heard a George Strait song after that night, they smiled. Because they'd been there, they'd experienced something magical. They'd survived the impossible and come out the other side changed, but not broken, grieving but not defeated, forever connected by a concert that nobody expected would be anything different, until it became absolutely unforgettable.